Hello everybody, it's Kara from Wild Book Garden, and today I'm here with a review of a nonfiction book, and that is The Defiant Middle: How Women Claim Life's In-Betweens to Remake the World by Kaya Oakes. I received this ARC in exchange for an honest review, so thank you so much, and at the time of this video going up, it should be pretty close to the release date for this book, which is November 30th, 2021. I will link the Defiant Middle's Goodreads page down below in case you want to read a little bit more about it. But yeah, this is a nonfiction book. I'm going to be doing a review today. So the premise of this book is about social and cultural expectations of women and how restrictive those are, and how basically there's no way to win. There's no way to fit perfectly into what society wants of women because it's self-contradictory. There's a part actually from the Goodreads description that I think sums this up really well. It says they should be young enough but not too young, old enough but not too old, creative but not crazy, passionate but not angry. And it goes on like that. So basically it's an impossible ask. And women have never fit into that. Women are more complex than that. And also throughout history, women have always done incredible things anyway. Like, even though women and girls have been stuck in this kind of in-between space, they're caught between these social expectations and their much more complicated reality. Even though they've been in that place, they've been able to carve out a place for themselves, and they've been able to do really important work in the community or in religion or other cultural institutions, and that's kind of what this book is about. So kind of the structure of this book, each chapter is named after like a characteristic that women are not supposed to be. So chapter 1 is young, chapter 2 is old, chapter 3 is crazy, chapter 4 is barren, chapter 5 is butch, femme, or other, chapter 6 is angry, and chapter 7 is alone. And this is actually like a quite short nonfiction book. Also, you can see I have a lot of tabs. I really enjoyed this, and I had a lot of things that really stood out to me that I really liked. And yeah, so kind of the structure of the book is it goes chapter by chapter through all of these different characteristics that women are not supposed to be or have. And in each chapter, Kaya Oakes looks at some religious and historical women. This is like a spiritually and religiously focused book, but it also talks a lot about wider culture and like community in general. So religion is a prominent element of the book, which makes sense given Kaya Oakes' background and the kinds of things she normally writes about, but not all of the women she covers are religious figures. And so in each chapter, she kind of picks out a few like historical or in some cases current women, and she talks about them as examples of these things that society wants from women but doesn't want from women at the same time. Like, again, there's a lot about contradictions in this book, and I think that the structure and the way that Kaya Oakes balanced like different parts of the writing of this book was really, really good throughout. Like, I think she did a really good job of balancing the quotations from other writers or other theologians or other historians with her own analysis and like with her own examples and everything, and then also just putting in a tiny bit of her own experiences. Like, this book definitely isn't a memoir, but I think it'd be weird if Kaya Oakes was talking about societal expectations of women and she didn't talk about how those had personally affected her as well. It's definitely like very light on the memoir aspects, but I just think everything that she included in here was really well balanced. I also really loved the different examples she used and the way that she chose those and like incorporated them into the book. And it's not always like a straightforward, like each chapter has one woman that she's focusing on. There are definitely some chapters where you can tell that one person is more the focus. Like the chapter on Dorothy Day and all of the things that she said about Dorothy Day, I really, really loved. I thought that was fantastic. But there's also ways that she incorporates talking about like historical or literary women, or current events, you know, like current women as well, in much smaller ways, or like she doesn't have to make it necessarily the focus of a chapter for it to really like enrich and add to the book. Like, I really, really love the way that Kaya Oakes wrote about Mary Magdalene. I think that was a really excellent, like, I just really loved what she had to say there. I have quite a few chapters in this book that I could call favorite chapters. Like, I really loved the one called Barren. It talks a lot about the expectations we have of women as nurturers, and especially like specifically like having children, and the way that society treats that and expects that. And I love the way that she reframed the idea, like especially like in biblical imagery, about a desert being barren, and the way that she kind of reframes that and looks at it differently. Just like the different imagery that she talks about there is something that I hadn't come across before, and I really liked that. I just think that chapter had a lot of great things to say about, like, not just the fact that current culture kind of expects women to be mothers, and thinks of them selfishly if they're not, but also like the specific ways that we like expect women to be mothers or like caregivers or nurturing, and the way that like the way that we expect women to give of themselves. I just think that chapter had a lot of really interesting things to say about a lot of different aspects. Like, it's not just about societal expectations of, like, you know, women having children. Also, speaking of which, this is a good time to mention that I will list content warnings in the description box, and I encourage you to check those if there's anything you'd want to know about, especially because some of them I think are not necessarily things you might expect based on the premise of the book. Like, for example, there's a fairly descriptive scene of like reproductive surgery, so I just encourage you to look at that. And then another of my favorite chapters was the one called Angry. I just found that incredibly well done, really interesting and satisfying. Like, it really resonated for me a lot. And actually one of my favorite quotes in the whole book, which I had many, is this one. And obviously this is an arc, so subject to change, but patriarchal culture that critiques women as being too emotional has somehow managed to erase the idea that anger is an emotion, because anger has become the domain of men. I just think that's incredibly well said. Yeah, like, and it's very true, and just like seeing her say it like that is like, it made me realize that, like, how true this is and how widespread this idea is, that it's like, yeah, how ridiculous it is that we think of women as the emotional ones when we train men to express anger constantly, basically. And she also makes the point that, like, patriarchy hurts men as well, which is true, and I appreciate that. I also think she did a really good job of incorporating very recent examples of these things. That's another thing you might want to look into for content warnings, is she talks about some specific instances, like when she's talking about police violence and like sexual assault and that kind of thing. There are some very specific, very big cases or examples that she talks about, which I think strengthens the book, but definitely be aware of that going in. And then another chapter I specifically want to mention is the one called Butch Femme Other, which I think was fantastic. This book is very explicitly trans-inclusive, which I think is so important. Like, she obviously talks a lot about how it is inhumane to exclude trans women, and also how it is illogical, and I just think she did both of those things really well. I also think it's really interesting how we see in that chapter that the binary idea of gender is like a very, very recent thing. And it made me think about how, like, in one of my college classes, I don't even remember like what topic it was, but my professor was saying how, like, pretty much every, like, restrictive conservative movement has tried to pull the, like, we're going back to our roots thing to try and, like, lend it some validity, and every time that has not actually been the case. Like, if you look back farther, it's actually more traditional to be more inclusive. And I think you can really see that from this chapter. So obviously I thought this book was fantastic. There were a few things I wanted to mention that weren't my favorite. Like, for example, there were a couple of, like, I think sometimes the way that Kaya Oakes made connections, like, most of the time I, like, totally saw where she was coming from, and I thought she did a good job of showing those connections. But there were one or two times where it didn't quite click for me. Like, she's talking about Saint Dymphna and how she's the patron saint of mental illness, and I got some of what she was talking about there, but I don't know, like, the reason that she gave for why she was the patron saint of mental illness and why she shouldn't have been. Like, basically she kind of was reading that as a commentary on women's sexuality, when I don't necessarily think that was the case. I'm not an expert on Saint Dymphna, but that was just something I noticed. And I also didn't love the way she used the St. Joan of Arc example. I obviously just did an extensive discussion video on a couple of books about Joan of Arc, so maybe I'm, like, extra attuned to that right now. There were just some things I didn't love about the way she used Joan as an example. Like, she does the dress thing that I mentioned before that's very frustrating, where, like I just find it frustrating when historians or writers use the dressing in men's clothing thing as, like, this is why Joan died, is because men didn't like it that she was strong like a man, kind of thing. I go into a lot of detail in that discussion video on, like, why I don't think that's, like, an accurate way to portray what happened to her. And then finally, I wasn't always clear on the distinction Kaya Oakes was making between mysticism and, like, the mental state of some of the people she was talking about. Again, kind of similar to the examples. It was like, sometimes I saw where she was coming from, and sometimes I just wasn't clear on, like, how she made certain distinctions. Aside from that, though, I thought this was really, really fantastic. I think if the, like, subject material is something that interests you even a little bit, I think you would get a lot out of this. I think you would really enjoy it. It's also really, really well written and, like, extremely readable. Like, I read this in basically 2 sittings, and it is short, but, like, I think for nonfiction that is still pretty impressive. Like, I just think that Kaya Oakes writes so engagingly and so smartly. And I just really, really loved this. So I give The Defiant Middle 4.5 stars. I think it's a fantastic celebration of the complexity of women, and it definitely doesn't excuse the wider society and culture for the restrictions we put on women and the horrible punishments we inflict if they don't live up to these ideals and these restrictions. Like, I definitely don't think the message is, oh, women can rise above that, so it's fine. Like, I think Kaya Oaks makes it very clear that we should not have to rise above this. And actually there's a really great quotation I loved. It's talking about how one of the compliments for young women especially is often about how mature they are. And it says, young women are mature not only because of their own choices, but because of the choices of the generations that came before them and the wreckage those generations left in their wake. I just think that's very true. Like, I think what we call maturity is so often growing up before girls should have to. So again, the book is definitely not making the point that because women are capable of still doing incredible work, that we don't have a responsibility to change the way we treat them. That's not what the book is saying at all. But I do think she does a good job of showing not only the consequences when women don't live up to these ideals and the things that happen to them. There's a couple examples in particular that are quite difficult to read. So we definitely cover that in the book, but we also see kind of the incredible things that women and girls can be and accomplish. And like I said, 4.5 stars. I think this was really fantastic. Please comment down below and let me know if you're planning to pick this book up, or maybe you've already read it. Let me know what you thought. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!